So, welcome back to another custom-tailored deep dive. I mean, we are really excited to have you here with us today.
Yeah, we have a really fascinating one for you this time. It is a pretty intense
Oh,
topic.
it is, yeah.
Yeah.
Today we are looking at this really intriguing theological essay. It's titled From the Well of Suffering to Eternal Grace.
Right. And it's basically a massive comparative
Yeah,
analysis. Yeah.
exactly. Our goal for this deep dive is to explore how this specific author compares the Buddhist concept of the sea of suffering with the Christian concept of the valley of the shadow of death.
Which is, I mean, that is a huge philosophical undertaking right there.
Oh, for sure. But, okay, let's unpack this. And before we jump in, we need to be clear about our ground rules.
Right. The impartiality disclaimer. Always important.
Always. So this source takes a very specific, faith-based Christian perspective, comparing Christianity favorably against other religious efforts.
Yeah, it's definitely coming from a distinct theological viewpoint.
Right. And our job today isn't to take a side or endorse a theology or validate the author's conclusions. Our mission is simply to act as your guides,
Yeah.
impartially unpacking the fascinating arguments, the vivid illustrations, and, the specific biblical interpretations the author uses to make their case.
Beautifully said. We are just looking at the architecture of the argument here.
Exactly. And to understand the author's thesis, we really have to start where the author starts,
Yeah.
which is with this surprisingly terrifying, almost action movie-style Buddhist parable about a man trapped in a well.
Oh, man, yeah. The parable of Dong. It is pure nightmare fuel.
It really is. So picture this. You are walking alone through a completely ordinary, quiet field, and out of nowhere, the dry grass around you just catches fire.
Just instantly, right? Like a wall of flames.
Yeah, this massive roaring ring of fire
Yeah.
that is actively closing in on you. And if that's not bad enough, you hear a sound, you look up, and there's this massive, completely unhinged, mad elephant charging directly at you.
So the fire and the charging elephant, basically zero options on the ground.
Zero. But then right before the elephant hits you, you spot a dark well, and it's covered in these thick, tangled wisteria vines. So having literally no other choice, you grab the vines and climb down into the well to escape.
Which, I mean, seems like a good move at the time until you realize what's actually in the well.
Right. It actually gets worse. So you're hanging there, halfway down, trying to catch your breath. You look up, and sitting at the edge of the well are two mice, one white and one black.
And they are just systematically shooing through the exact vine you're hanging from.
Yes. Your lifeline is actively being destroyed. So panic sets in, you look around the dirt walls for a ledge, and you realize the crevices are full of poisonous snakes, just darting their tongues at you.
It is escalating so quickly. Up, down, sideways, it's all bad.
Yeah, and speaking of down, you look straight down to the bottom of the well, and waiting patiently at the bottom is a massive, unidentified monster with its jaws wide open.
Just waiting for the mice to finish their snack so you fall right in. It is absolute inevitable doom.
Complete doom. But here is the twist. You're hanging there in sheer terror, and suddenly, a drop of liquid hits your face. It's from a beehive on the vine above you. It's a drop of sweet honey.
Ah, the honey. This is the crucial part of the story.
It really is. It falls into your mouth, and for just a fleeting second, the sweetness is so intense that you completely forget your absolute terror.
You forget the mice, the snakes, the fire, all of it.
Right. And here's where it gets really interesting for me, because in modern terms, that drop of honey is basically the ultimate metaphor for human distraction.
Oh, absolutely.
I mean, it's like when your life is completely falling apart,
Yeah.
Deadlines are looming, everything is a mess, but you find this temporary bliss by mindlessly scrolling social media or eating a great piece of cake.
Yeah, it doesn't fix the monster at the bottom of the well, but for 3 seconds you feel great.
Exactly. So what does the author do with this?
Well, what's fascinating here is how the author interprets this parable. They use this story to illustrate the Buddhist worldview of life as a sea of suffering, or gohei.
Right, the well isn't just a bad day. The well is the baseline human condition.
Exactly. Life itself is the well. And the honey represents fleeting, temporary happiness in a world where, frankly, ultimate doom is inescapable.
Okay, so that brings up a pretty logical question. If the honey is just a temporary distraction from certain death, how does the author say humanity attempts to escape the well entirely?
Well, the text outlines the traditional Buddhist response, which leans really heavily on extreme human effort.
We're talking about asceticism, right?
Yeah, extreme asceticism, retreating to the mountains, completely leaving society behind, facing a wall to meditate for years.
Just staggering mental discipline.
For sure. The goal there is to achieve nirvana, this state of total selflessness, to mentally and spiritually escape the secular world and the terror of the well.
Trying to basically outclimb the reality of the snapping vine.
That's a great way to put it.
Yeah.
But the author points out a really crucial historical detail from the text here.
Oh, about Buddhist disciples.
Yeah. When Buddhist disciples explicitly asked him about the afterlife, the author claims Buddha gave a surprisingly ambiguous answer. Essentially, maybe there is, maybe there isn't.
Wow. That's incredibly honest.
It is. The author actually views this not as a flaw, but as a profound, honest admission of human limitation. Asceticism can help you ignore the mice, but it doesn't give you answers about what happens after you fall.
Okay, so what does this all mean then? I need to push back a little here to drive this forward.
Go for it.
The author claims humans have this profound fear of death. But if humans invented these intense religious efforts like the extreme asceticism, just to cope with that fear, how does the author explain why we have that fear in the first place?
Yeah, that is the million-dollar question, right? Like, if death is just fading to black, why not just accept it?
Exactly. Why not just enjoy the honey until the vine snaps?
Well, the author answers this using some specific biblical citations. According to their framework, the fear of death isn't just biological. It's not just about ending existence.
It's deeper than that.
Much deeper. It is an innate spiritual dread of post-death judgment. The author cites Hebrews 9:27, which says it is appointed for men to die once, and after that comes judgment.
So it's the monster at the bottom. We intuitively know the monster is real.
Exactly. The author argues that God placed a desire for eternity in the human heart. And because of that, humans inherently fear this divine judgment. We know we aren't just returning to dust.
Okay, that makes the well feel infinitely more hopeless.
Yeah.
If human effort can't overcome this fear of judgment, the author obviously has to provide an alternative. Right?
They do, yes.
So how does the author bridge the gap between the Buddhist sea of suffering and the Christian worldview?
Well, the author starts by directly comparing the Buddhist sea of suffering to the Christian concept of the valley of the shadow of death.
From Psalm 23, right?
Yeah. Both concepts acknowledge the same grim reality. Humanity is in a perilous, doomed state. We are trapped in the well.
The diagnosis is the same,
Yeah.
but the cure is where they split.
Exactly. If we connect this to the bigger picture, the author's central argument is that escaping this valley, or this well, is utterly impossible through human ability.
You can't climb out on your own.
You can't. Anything you do is just an action inside the closed system of the well. It requires an invisible, transcendent power to intervene, a rescue from the outside.
And the author's theological answer for that rescue is God taking on human flesh as Jesus Christ.
Precisely. The text asserts that by breaking the power of death and resurrecting, Jesus provides the only actual escape from the second death, which is that judgment of the soul.
Right. And the author uses some very specific proof texts here, don't they?
They do. They point to John 5:24, which says, "Whoever believes has crossed over from death to life and avoids judgment."
Okay, so it's about belief, not action.
Yes, and Romans 10:9, "Believing in the heart that God raised him from the dead and confessing with the mouth leads to salvation." It is entirely about reliance on the rescuer, not your climbing skills.
Okay, wait a minute. I have to play devil's advocate for a second here.
I figured you might.
The author is heavily criticizing the Buddhist reliance on extreme self-discipline and asceticism. But, don't plenty of Christians do the exact same thing?
Oh, absolutely.
Don't they rely on strict religious rules and this intense zeal to feel saved? Trying to build their own vine out of good deeds.
Yeah, and that is exactly the author's next point. They don't shy away from this at all. The author turns the critique inward, heavily addressing the Pharisees within Christianity.
Oh, wow. So they call out their own side.
Very aggressively, yeah. The author condemns those who treat the law as their lifeblood, using extreme religious zeal to serve God. They actually quote Jesus in Matthew 23:33.
What does that say?
Jesus harshly rebukes the hyper-religious leaders, calling them snakes and a brood of vipers, asking how they will escape being condemned to hell.
That is brutal to say that to the most religious people in the room.
It really is. It basically says their frantic religious effort isn't saving them at all.
Which naturally leads to the question, if the rules aren't there to save you, why did God give the law in the first place? And the author breaks down this specific theological argument, right?
Yeah, using Galatians 3:15 through 22, it sets up a really interesting timeline.
Right, because the law was given 430 years after the promise of grace to Abraham.
Exactly. It was a very late addition.
And the purpose was specifically To lock everyone up under sin. That's the phrase,
Yep.
right? To make humans realize their sin, not to save them. Like an MRI machine.
Oh, that's a great analogy.
Yeah, an MRI shows you exactly where your bone is broken. But if you try to use the MRI machine to actually cure the break, it's not going to work. The law just illuminates how hopelessly trapped in the well humanity is.
Right. And to prove how fragile that legalistic mindset is, the author cites James 2.0 Adalis. It says, if you keep the whole law perfectly, but stumble in just one tiny point, you are guilty of breaking all of it.
Wow. So if one strand of your perfect behavior vine snaps, you fall. That is terrifying.
It is, which is why the author heavily contrasts this legalism with a totally different concept, using Romans 8.15.
The spirit of adoption, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Believers didn't receive a spirit that makes them a slave again to fear. They received the spirit of adoption crying out, Abba, Father.
So it shifts from being a terrified victim trying to earn survival to realizing the well is on your father's property and he's already pulled you out.
Exactly. It completely changes the psychology of the believer.
And that shift leads to a pretty stern warning to the church from the author, especially for people who speak in front of others or hold leadership roles.
Yeah, relying on self-righteousness is incredibly dangerous in this framework.
The author cites Luke 16.15. You are the ones who justify yourselves in the eyes of others, but God knows your hearts. What people value highly is detestable in God's sight.
Basically saying, stop bragging about how well you climb the vine.
Right. The only thing worth boasting about, according to the author, is Jesus Christ. Everything else is just bragging about the honey while the mice are chewing.
That is a perfect way to synthesize it. The author uses this terrifying imagery of the Buddhist well to establish a common human problem impending death and judgment.
We are all in the well.
Yes. But while the author views other religious efforts, and even Christian legalism, as futile attempts to climb a slippery vine, true salvation is presented differently. It's a total reliance on divine grace and that spirit of adoption.
And the author finishes with a really urgent concluding charge, a reminder from Revelation. He who has an ear, let him hear what the Spirit says to the churches.
A final plea to listen.
Yeah. The author urges believers that the true fullness of the Holy Spirit isn't about perfect behavior. It's about continually learning and relearning about Jesus through faith. And they end with the blessing, Emmanuel.
God with us. It really is a sweeping journey from existential terror to theological comfort.
It is.
And, looking at all of this raises an important question, even if we step outside the specific theology for a second.
Oh, I like where this is going. What is it?
If we look at our own lives, regardless of our religious background, how often are we desperately trying to weave our own vines of self-justification or perfectionism to escape our anxieties?
Oh, man. All the time, hustle culture, moral grandstanding.
Right. We exhaust ourselves trying to prove we deserve to survive. And how often do we mistake a temporary drop of honey, like a promotion, a distraction, a fleeting success, for an actual rescue from the well?
That is such a profound thought to leave on. Are you actually safe, or are you just tasting the honey?
Exactly.
Well, thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive. We really hope it gave you something to chew on. Keep exploring, keep questioning the world around you, and we will catch you next time.